You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
Welcome to One Bite is Everything, the podcast that connects every bite you take to the bigger world. I'm your host, DiPrima. If this is your first time here, this is as good a place to start as any. If you've been here for a while, I'm glad that we get to continue the conversation. I have been bringing you interview after interview with some pretty amazing thought leaders, and there are more to come. Some I've already recorded that are in production, but from time to time I like to pause and talk with you about some of the threads I'm following and some questions I have the privilege of asking, but where the answers come up a little bit short. I'm the first to admit that I have more questions than answers. This space, the one between what's on your plate and the rest of the world, seems to breed that imbalance. But from where I sit, having questions is a big part of the solution. I see that for you. Lately, questions have circled around a few key issues. Some are big headlines in the news and others are quietly bubbling in the background. What I know to be true and what I've outlined here on One Bite is Everything before, I'm going to link the episode for you, is that we are heading for a food crisis. I don't mean to be a drama queen at all, and I'm not building hype to get you to keep listening, but there are a lot of signs that are all pointing in the same direction. Some of those signs have been around for a long time. Industrialized food, that food that inhabits the main middle aisles of every grocery store if you take a moment to look with fresh eyes. Cheap labor, the labor we depend on to mass produce food for those same shelves as well as year-round strawberries. It's easy to poke holes. It's harder to come up with solutions. I hope that we can balance that here. Maybe not today in one short episode, but over time in this ever-unfurling conversation about food and how it literally connects to every single thing you care about in your life, from your family to your health to the land, your environment, and to your wallet, and so much more. That brings us here to a topic that has been top of mind for me recently, one you have heard about and probably have questions about. And it is also a main thread in two upcoming podcast episodes, one with Evan Harrison of Kiss the Ground and one with Toni Farmer, a gardener with a big Instagram following, who is also an adjunct professor in agriculture at UPenn. If you've been anywhere near the world of food and farming lately, you've probably heard the word regenerative. It's everywhere. It's hopeful. It's inspiring. It's also confusing. And in some cases, it's deeply misleading. In this episode, I want to unpack regenerative agriculture, what it's supposed to mean, why it's still a very mushy concept, and how big ag is clinging to the coattails of a movement pioneered by small farmers to gain bigger market share and polish their brands. I'm also going to connect this to a recent episode where I lay out 10 reasons why we're heading for a food crisis. Spoiler, the lack of clarity around regenerative is one of the cracks in the foundation. And I'll set the stage for those two upcoming conversations with Evan Harrison of Kiss the Ground, a group that promotes regenerative practices but struggles to pin down who and what counts, and with Toni Farmer, that gardener and adjunct professor at UPenn, with a master's in regenerative agriculture. There's a lot of good in those episodes, and I want you to go in with your eyes wide open. So let's get into it. At its heart, regenerative agriculture is about healing. Healing soil, water, biodiversity, and communities. It often includes practices like cover cropping, crop rotation, rotational grazing, composting, and planting trees alongside crops. Unlike organic, though, regenerative has no legal standard. There's no USDA label, no certification that means the same thing everywhere. This is part of the problem. I'm not hanging my hat on the USDA's authority here either, just in case you're wondering. For one farmer, regenerative might mean no tilling and keeping living roots in the ground. For another, it might mean adding livestock to cropland. For another, it might just mean planting a cover crop and calling it a day. So the term has become elastic, and elasticity is great for marketing, but not so great for trust. Here's where the story gets complicated. Big companies, the Cargills, the PepsiCos, the General Mills of the world, have seen that consumers love the idea of regeneration. They've seen that it tests well with focus groups. They've seen that small producers and advocates are passionate, vocal, and making headlines. Just this morning, I saw a post on Instagram by National Geographic, paid for by PepsiCo, touting the practices of a group of farmers in Iowa with a farmer-led initiative supported by Pepsi's Sustainable Ag division. It gave me pause, and if the comments are any indication, it will not sit well with viewers either. So, big ag, big corporations, they've jumped in on regenerative. They're announcing regenerative initiatives. They're putting regenerative on packaging. They're funding flashy pilot programs. But ask the hard questions. What practices? Which farms? What standards? And you hit a wall. Often, the regenerative label is being used to describe very conventional operations with very minor tweaks. In other words, Big Ag is holding on to the coattails of a movement led by small farmers who take the risks, innovate, and do the hard work while trying to make us believe that they're the ones leading the charge. This isn't just misleading. It actively reshapes markets. It positions corporations as the face of regeneration while the real practitioners are sidelined. To be fair, the movement itself has left the door open. There are no strict protocols, no universally agreed upon checklist, no enforcement. And while checklists and standards sound boring, without them, the word regenerative can mean anything, and therefore nothing. This vagueness has consequences. Consumers who want to support soil health, biodiversity, and family farmers end up confused. Small farmers who actually do regenerative work don't get the credit or the price premiums that they deserve. And Big Ag gets a green light to greenwash. It's worth asking, are we repeating the mistakes of the organic movement? Organic started as a radical farmer-led alternative. Then it got standardized, but that standardization also made it possible for Big Ag to move in, scale it up, and strip it of most of its heart. Regenerative hasn't even set the rules yet, and that means it's vulnerable. In my episode on the food crisis, I laid out 10 reasons why we could be heading for trouble. Shrinking farmland, labor shortages, consolidation, policy cuts, investor land grabs, climate pressures, and more. Yes, I will link it in the show notes. The regenerative story connects directly to this. Why? Because without clarity, regenerative can act like a distraction. It gives the illusion that we're fixing the food system while ignoring deeper problems. If Big Ag gets to claim the regenerative mantle, we may miss the real warning signs that farmland is being lost faster than it's being regenerated, that farmers are going bankrupt even while soil programs expand, that the real costs of consolidation, labor, and policy gaps aren't solved by soil health alone. We need to hold regenerative accountable, not just to the soil, but to the whole food system. In upcoming episodes, we're going to hear from Evan Harrison of Kiss the Ground, which has been one of the biggest promoters of regenerative agriculture. They've elevated the movement with big budget films and celebrity, but they are not addressing the implications of this same mushy definition. Yes, I ask Evan about that tension. I'll also be talking to Toni Farmer, a gardener and adjunct professor at Penn, who holds a master's degree in regenerative agriculture. She brings an academic and practical lens, and she's also sounding the alarm about the food crisis. But while teaching this topic and tending a regenerative garden, she's not yet worried about the definition or standards. I think she should be. Those conversations will add depth to this whole story, but today I wanted to set the stage so that you can listen with a critical ear. Here's the takeaway. Regenerative agriculture is important. Soil health matters. Biodiversity matters. Water cycles matter. But unless we define it clearly and hold it accountable, regenerative risks becoming just another buzzword. Big Ag will happily greenwash the term to gain market share, and the movement itself has to decide whether it wants to stay fuzzy or create standards that actually protect farmers, eaters, and the planet. Our food future depends on more than marketing. It depends on truth, on clarity, and on action. Thanks for listening to One Bite is Everything, the podcast that connects every bite you take to the bigger world. If today's conversation sparks something for you, remember, the stories you hear here don't end when the episode does. Through the For Farmers movement, these stories become action, supporting small farmers and bringing eaters like you closer to the people who make your food possible. Learn more at forfarmersmovement.com. You can also follow along for more facts and red flags on Instagram at XOXOFarmGirl. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to rate and review One Bite is Everything on Apple Podcasts. It helps more people like you find the show. One Bite is Everything starts on your plate, and it has a big reach. It's a food podcast and a politics podcast and a health, community, and economy podcast because food touches quite literally everything. This episode was co-produced by Sonia Dillon with sound design and original music by Russell Chapa. I'm your host, Dana DiPrima, and I will see you here again next week for another episode of One Bite is Everything. Until then, eat like it matters, because it does.